Rachel Reeves says she knows what she wants to do. She says that we need a dose of Trump positivity. Has she forgotten that she needs a bit of economic policy to actually assist the economy in growing?
She really is not making a good impression here. You know, I agree with what you said. She doesn't appear to have a plan. She keeps telling us she has a plan. But then when you read that the Treasury is hauling in heads of regulatory agencies and asking them for advice on how to grow the economy, it doesn't really fill you with any kind of optimism, does it? And I think this is underreported, the pressure that the Treasury is putting on regulators to somehow accelerate growth. Regulators are there for a reason. Regulators are there to protect us. They're there to take the punch bowl away when the party gets going, not to add more rum. We're looking at the Financial Times today, and I'm sorry, I'm just obsessed with this. I'm going straight over to you, but the Financial Times is reporting that the Treasury wants to water down some of the audit proposals. They want to make it easier for auditors to give companies a clean bill of health. This is not that long after BHS collapsed with a big hole in its pension fund. Regulators are there for a reason, and it's not to accelerate growth.
Now, any opportunity to push the paper for which I write a column, the FT Weekend, I will happily do so. Jobs cut, rekindle stagnation fears is on their front page. They're not regularly accused of pulling apart a Labour Party, sometimes pink paper in nature and thought and some of the things that they say. But they certainly don't seem to be giving Rachel Reeves a good write-up. I just want to, at the risk of being boring, Laurie, I just want to step back as to those who would advocate higher taxes. Why sometimes, if you put tax up, might you actually receive less money in the coffers?
Well, look, it depends on which taxes you're looking at. And I know there is a school of thought that if you lower taxes, people will work more, and therefore tax aggregates, at some point at a later date. It sort of depends where those taxes fall. And I think you and I have discussed this before. I think the original sin with Rachel Reeves was to rule out any kind of taxes on increase in income tax, to accept 2/3 of the tax base, VAT, income tax,
but with due respect, though,
revenue.
Yeah, but with respect, she has increased income tax because she's left the thresholds at the same level in an inflationary environment. So she's already increased. She's already increased those taxes.
Yeah, it's a stealth tax increase. You're absolutely right, because inflation boosts incomes. It doesn't necessarily boost buying power, but it boosts income and drags a lot of people into higher tax brackets. I think what Rachel Reeves assumed is if she increased the employer's NI contribution, that decision was made thinking that the UK labour market is pretty strong right now. The problem is we don't have great data on the UK labour market. The Office for National Statistics has said that the survey that they derive the unemployment rate from is broken, and they won't be able to fix it until 2027 or so. But the assumption, I think, was employment is pretty safe right now. The unemployment rate's at a historic low, so let's try and raise taxes on employers. We're starting to see now. We had an announcement yesterday from Sainsbury, 3,000 jobs to go. There's some anecdotal survey evidence from purchasing managers indicating that companies are planning to let people go at the quickest rate since 2009. Take that survey with a bit of a grain of salt, but it's looking like the employment market isn't as strong as Rachel Reeves thought it was when she announced these stung employers with a higher tax.
How can we trust anything that Rachel Reeves says when, on one hand, there was evidence last week in this article in the Times that 10,000 millionaires left the UK in 2024. What would Reeves say to them? She disputes the figures but highlights plans for more visas for highly skilled migrants. The fact is that we're going to see a U-turn on that particular policy, it would appear, from reports coming out. Yeah. And then she says, in this article, she says, the tax rises in the budget were a necessity. There will be no going back. It's not possible to back down on these things. The public finances are an absolute mess. I had to make a number of difficult decisions around welfare on spending tax, both in July and the budget. If I start reversing tax increases, that stability that I've returned to the public finances would unravel. Well, she's already done one U-turn. She needs to do more, doesn't she?
Well, I'm taking exception now with Rachel Reeves constantly saying, I'm making the tough decisions. I think we're seeing that this government is a little bit frightened of standing up to vested interests. One big story, again, underreported this week, and I'm back to my regulatory obsession, is the Competition and Markets Authority. The Treasury sort of pushed out the chairman of that agency. The Competition and Markets Authority makes sure that competition exists. If you have too few players in any industry, they can raise prices. We tend to pay more. The chairman of that agency was pushed out, replaced by the ex-head of Amazon. Amazon, not really a market sort of company. Amazon has a dominant market position, and it looks like the government is scared to stand up to the regulators, scared to stand up to vested
interests. But also, she seems to be scared to make the decisions that she needs to take. So you are an economist, Laurie. So if you were trying to drive growth, I'm not necessarily asking for a whole range of specific policies, but just one sign that the Chancellor actually wanted to develop growth, what would be the first thing that you would do if suddenly somebody saw common sense and shoved you into number 11 Downing Street?
I think that, oh, God forbid, but I think that the first thing that the government has to do is prove that it can fix the planning system, and it can take on those vested interests, make it easier for people to live and work near, or to live where they want to work, make it easier for people to have housing near where they want to work. The government has said it's going to be bold on planning. We haven't seen a whole lot of
But we haven't seen any changes on that. But then, Laurie, there are enough planning permissions already in place to deal with the UK's housing problem. If you really want to solve the housing issue, you've got to change the financing market, you've got to change the tax system, and you've got to change your attitude to taxing risk and reward. Because those developers, they will develop if they've got the labour available to do it and if they've got the money available to build. But development finance remains incredibly expensive and very difficult to get hold of. And taxes have gone up, which means that risk-reward returns. A lot of developers are saying to me, not going to do it in this environment, too much risk, not enough return.
Well, it's not just housing that needs, where we need to see a streamlined planning. It's corporate building as well, building factories, building laboratories. I mean, life sciences is an area in which we have a competitive advantage. But again, it's difficult for people to build these scientific buildings in the places where they want to build them. If you look at Cambridge, lots of people want to build there, but there are water issues. Is the government going to take on these interests? But we get back to housing. Something that I'm concerned about here is the government talking about leaning on the banks to lend people more money to buy a house. We've been here before. Encouraging people to take on debt that they may not be able to pay back is not a long-term plan for growth.
It certainly isn't, Laurie. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. That's Laurie Laird, economist, giving us her thoughts on Rachel Reeves, saying that Britain needs a dose of Trump positivity. But then also, Rachel Reeves comments that she knows what needs to be done. As soon as you read the words in her article, you realise that she doesn't, which is why I'm asking the question, what does Rachel Reeves need to do?